Right now, as you're watching this, your body is receiving electromagnetic signals from every living thing around you. Scientists at the Institute of HeartMath have documented how human hearts can detect and respond to the electromagnetic fields of trees from over 50 feet away. Yet most of us feel nothing. Here's what researchers won't tell you. We're born with the same biological receivers that allow migratory birds to navigate thousands of miles and dolphins to communicate across ocean basins. Studies show that people who spend just 15 minutes in old-growth forests experience measurable changes in brainwave patterns. Their neural activity synchronizes with the biorhythmic pulses of the surrounding ecosystem. Indigenous trackers in the Amazon still use this ability to locate water sources and predict weather changes days in advance. They're not mystical, they're biologically normal. We're the anomaly. Decades of electromagnetic pollution and urban isolation have essentially deafened us to nature's constant communication. But here's the remarkable part. This dormant sense can be reactivated. And the key lies in a technique that's been hidden in plain sight for over 4,000 years. In 1925, archaeologists working in the Valley of the Kings made a discovery that would forever change our understanding of ancient Egyptian knowledge systems. Hidden within a sealed chamber, they found papyrus scrolls containing detailed diagrams of tree root systems mapped against celestial star patterns. The precision was staggering, root networks drawn with mathematical accuracy that wouldn't be matched by modern botany until the 1970 seconds. But here's what made this discovery truly extraordinary. These weren't separate drawings. The Egyptians had overlaid the root systems directly onto star maps, creating what appeared to be a unified blueprint of cosmic and terrestrial organization. This discovery validates something the mystery schools had preserved for over 3,000 years, the teachings attributed to Thoth, known to the Greeks as Hermes Trismegistus. While most people know the phrase, "as above, so below," as some mystical catchphrase, the reality is far more practical and scientifically profound. Thoth wasn't sharing religious doctrine. He was providing a technical manual for understanding how natural intelligence networks actually function. The Emerald Tablet, that legendary text supposedly containing Thoth's core teachings, has been dismissed by academia as medieval alchemy. Yet when you examine its central principle through the lens of modern systems science, something remarkable emerges. That which is above is like that which is below, and that which is below is like that which is above, to accomplish the miracles of the one thing. This isn't poetry. It's a precise description of fractal organization patterns that govern everything from quantum mechanics to galactic structures. Consider the humble fern leaf. Each small leaflet mirrors the shape of the entire frond, which mirrors the shape of the whole plant. This self-similar pattern repeats at every scale of observation. Now look at your cardiovascular system. Your arteries branch into smaller arteries, which branch into capillaries, following the exact same mathematical principles as river deltas, lightning bolts, and the cosmic web of dark matter connecting galaxies. The ancient Egyptians recognized this universal organizing principle and understood that consciousness itself follows these same patterns. Trees embody this hermetic principle more perfectly than perhaps any other living system. Their branch structures mirror their root systems with stunning precision. A maple tree's canopy spread will almost exactly match its root spread underground. The branching angles, the distribution patterns, even the seasonal growth cycles, everything above ground has its corresponding pattern below ground. This isn't coincidence. It's the fundamental architecture of how natural intelligence organizes itself. But the Egyptians understood something we're only now rediscovering through advanced electromagnetic research. Trees function as massive biological antennae, conducting electrical currents between earth and sky. Dr. Andrew Goldsworthy's research at Imperial College London has documented how trees generate measurable electrical fields through their root systems. These fields interact with the Earth's natural electromagnetic grid, creating a communication network that spans entire forests. The ancient Egyptian texts describe trees as living pillars connecting the realm of Nut to the realm of Geb, sky to earth. They weren't speaking metaphorically. They had identified trees as electromagnetic conductors facilitating energy exchange between terrestrial and atmospheric electrical systems. Modern atmospheric physicists have confirmed that trees play crucial roles in local weather pattern generation, ion distribution, and even influence the formation of clouds through their electromagnetic signatures. This knowledge was considered so valuable that it became the foundation of mystery school teachings throughout the ancient world. The Eleusinian mysteries in Greece, the Mithraic traditions in Rome, the Druidic circles in Celtic lands, all preserved variations of these same core principles. They understood that by aligning human consciousness with these natural patterns, one could access the intelligence networks that trees and other natural systems use to communicate and coordinate behavior. The symbol Thoth, left behind, the caduceus with two serpents spiraling around a central staff, appears everywhere in nature. DNA's double helix structure, the spiral patterns of nautilus shells, the arms of spiral galaxies, the formation of hurricanes, even the electromagnetic field lines around the human heart. These aren't random similarities. They represent the fundamental organizing principle of how information and energy move through living systems. Now here's where this gets really interesting, and why some of the most powerful applications of these principles can't be shared openly on YouTube. The advanced techniques that the mystery schools developed for interfacing with natural intelligence networks require careful guidance and proper understanding of electromagnetic safety protocols. That's why subscribers to our Insights Academy receive exclusive access to these deeper practices, including a complimentary copy of the Kybalion, the most accurate modern translation of Hermetic principles available. But this offer is only available for a limited time, as these materials are too sensitive for general distribution. Your own consciousness structure follows these same fractal patterns. The neural networks in your brain mirror the mycelial networks of forest fungi, which mirror the root networks of trees, which mirror the cosmic web connecting galaxies. Understanding this isn't just philosophical insight, it's practical knowledge that unlocks your biological capacity to interface with natural intelligence systems. The Rosicrucians preserved detailed instructions for what they called vegetable communion, specific techniques for synchronizing human brainwave patterns with the electromagnetic frequencies generated by trees. These weren't meditation practices. They were technical procedures based on precise understanding of bioelectrical resonance principles. The Knights Templar incorporated similar knowledge into their architectural designs, positioning their temples to optimize electromagnetic field interactions with surrounding forests. Modern neuroscience has identified that human brainwaves naturally synchronize with extremely low-frequency electromagnetic pulses generated by the Earth's ionosphere, the Schumann resonances. Trees, with their massive electromagnetic signatures, can amplify and modulate these frequencies. This creates opportunities for direct nervous system entrainment with natural intelligence networks, exactly as the ancient texts describe. The implications are staggering. We're not separate from nature's intelligence systems. We're designed to interface with them. The Hermetic principle, as above, so below, isn't mystical philosophy. It's a technical specification for how consciousness networks organize themselves across all scales of existence. And trees, with their perfect embodiment of this principle, serve as the ideal interface points for accessing these networks. But knowing the principle is just the beginning. The real question is, how do you actually establish this connection? How do you move from theoretical understanding to practical communication with natural intelligence? That's where the specific techniques come in, the methods that Thoth and the mystery schools developed for activating your dormant biological capabilities. Deep in the forests of British Columbia, a quiet revolution began when forest ecologist Suzanne Simard started asking questions that would shatter everything we thought we knew about how nature works. What she discovered wasn't just groundbreaking science. It was proof that indigenous cultures had been right all along about the living intelligence of forests. Simard's research revealed something extraordinary. Beneath our feet exists a biological internet more sophisticated than anything humans have created. She called it the Wood Wide Web, a vast network of fungal threads called mycorrhizae that connect virtually every plant in the forest. These microscopic filaments, finer than spider silk, weave through soil, creating a communication superhighway that spans entire ecosystems. Here's where it gets fascinating. The fungi don't just connect plants randomly. They form strategic partnerships. A single handful of forest soil contains miles of these fungal networks, and they're constantly buzzing with chemical conversations. Trees literally trade resources through this system. A massive Douglas fir, which Simard termed a mother tree, can support dozens of younger seedlings by channeling nutrients through the fungal network. When spring arrives and the big trees haven't leafed out yet, they receive sugars from smaller evergreens. It's a reciprocal economy that makes our human markets look primitive. But the real revelation came when Simard discovered that trees don't just share resources, they share information. When a tree comes under attack from insects, it releases chemical distress signals through the fungal network. These molecular messages travel from tree to tree, warning the entire forest community. The receiving trees then ramp up production of defensive compounds, essentially preparing for battle before the threat arrives. This isn't theoretical. In Africa, researchers documented acacia trees doing something that seemed impossible by conventional biology. When giraffes began browsing on one tree, within minutes, neighboring acacias started pumping tannins into their leaves, making them bitter and unpalatable. The giraffes, somehow aware of this chemical communication, would skip nearby trees and walk upwind to find acacias that hadn't received the warning signal yet. Even more remarkable, scientists at Tel Aviv University recently recorded the actual sounds of plant communication. Using incredibly sensitive microphones, they captured ultrasonic clicks and pops that plants emit when stressed. A thirsty tomato plant sounds different from one being cut. Tobacco plants have their own acoustic signature when damaged. We're literally surrounded by conversations we never knew were happening. This validates what indigenous peoples have maintained for millennia, that forests are conscious, communicating entities. What Western science dismissed as primitive superstition turns out to be sophisticated ecological knowledge. The Secwepemc people of British Columbia, Simard's own heritage, always knew that trees were connected, that forests had intelligence, that plants could communicate across distances. Our ancestors lived embedded in these communication networks. Before concrete cities and electromagnetic interference, human beings were part of this biological internet. We shared the same electromagnetic frequencies, the same chemical sensitivities. Recent studies show that trees generate measurable bioelectric fields, just like human hearts and brains do. The Earth itself pulses with electromagnetic rhythms, the Schumann resonances, that match human brainwave patterns. When you walk into an old-growth forest, your nervous system responds immediately. Cortisol levels drop, your parasympathetic nervous system activates, blood pressure decreases, heart rate variability improves. Japanese researchers studying forest bathing found that trees release airborne chemicals called phytoncides that boost human immune function for days after exposure. Your body recognizes something familiar in these ancient communication networks. Modern urban environments actively interfere with these natural connections. Concrete blocks the Earth's electrical field. Cell towers and Wi-Fi create electromagnetic noise that drowns out nature's subtle signals. We've surrounded ourselves with materials and frequencies that cut us off from the biological internet we evolved within. Different tree species have distinct communication signatures, like unique languages or dialects. Oaks communicate differently than pines. Birches have their own chemical vocabulary. Indigenous healers understood these differences intimately. They knew that willow trees concentrate salicin, the precursor to aspirin, in their bark as part of their chemical defense system. They recognized that cedar trees produce antifungal compounds that could heal human infections. The implications are staggering. We're not separate from nature. We're part of an interconnected web of communication that spans the entire living world. Our bioelectric fields can interface with plant electrical systems. Our chemical senses can detect the molecular messages plants constantly emit. We have the biological hardware to plug back into nature's internet. But here's what's crucial. While modern science can measure these phenomena with instruments and data, it can't teach us how to consciously access them. That knowledge was preserved in ancient traditions, in the techniques that Thoth encoded in the Emerald Tablet. Science proves the network exists, but the ancients left us the access codes. The Wood Wide Web isn't just a beautiful metaphor. It's a literal biological reality that we can learn to interface with directly, just as our ancestors did when they lived as conscious participants in nature's grand conversation. Now that you understand how the Wood Wide Web operates as nature's internet, connecting every tree through fungal networks that pulse with bioelectric signals, it's time to learn the precise method for plugging yourself into this ancient communication system. What I'm about to share isn't mystical wishful thinking. It's a scientifically grounded approach that works with your body's own electromagnetic field to establish genuine connection with forest consciousness. The moment you arrive at the forest edge, resist the urge to plunge straight in. This pause isn't ceremonial theater, it's neurological necessity. Your nervous system has been locked in sympathetic dominance for hours, maybe days. The sympathetic nervous system is your body's alarm state, flooding you with stress hormones that create a bioelectric signature trees recognize as threat or disturbance. Standing at that threshold for 60 to 90 seconds allows your vagus nerve to shift gears, activating your parasympathetic nervous system. This isn't just relaxation, it's a fundamental change in your electromagnetic output. During this transition, your heart rate variability increases dramatically. Instead of the rigid, stressed rhythm your heart maintained in the car or on the trail, it begins to exhibit the complex, adaptive patterns that characterize calm awareness. Trees are exquisitely sensitive to these cardiac rhythms because their own growth follows similar variable patterns. A stressed human broadcasting fight or flight frequencies will trigger defensive responses in nearby trees, causing them to literally close off communication channels through their root networks. Once you feel that initial settling, and you will feel it as a subtle softening in your chest and shoulders, take 3 deliberate breaths. Not the shallow chest breathing of anxiety, but deep diaphragmatic breaths that engage your entire torso. Each exhale should last longer than each inhale, triggering what researchers call the relaxation response. This isn't just psychological comfort, it's measurable physiology. Studies using electromagnetic field detectors show that focused breathing creates coherent wave patterns extending several feet from the human body. These coherent fields are your ticket into the forest network. Trees communicate through electromagnetic pulses that travel along fungal threads, and your coherent bioelectric field can interface with these signals when properly calibrated. Think of it like tuning a radio. You need to match the frequency to receive the broadcast. Before you approach any specific tree, state your intention either aloud or silently. This isn't about magical thinking, it's about neural focus. When you form a clear intention, your brain's prefrontal cortex organizes your entire nervous system around that goal. Researchers have documented how focused intention creates measurable changes in the electromagnetic field patterns surrounding the human body. Your biofield literally reshapes itself according to your conscious purpose. Keep your intention simple and respectful. Something like, "I'm here to listen and learn," or "I want to understand how you experience the world." Avoid demanding or extractive intentions. Trees respond to curiosity and reciprocity, not commands. Remember, you're requesting access to an intelligence that's been networking for millions of years longer than humans have existed. Now comes the selection process, and this is where most people overthink things. Don't choose a tree with your analytical mind. Let bioelectric resonance guide you. As you walk slowly through the forest, pay attention to subtle pulls or attractions. Certain trees will feel inviting while others seem neutral or even slightly repelling. This isn't imagination. It's your nervous system detecting electromagnetic compatibility. Different species broadcast different energetic signatures based on their physiological processes. Oak trees, with their deep taproots and slow growth patterns, generate steady, grounding frequencies that can help stabilize anxious or scattered nervous systems. Their bioelectric signature feels solid, dependable, like a bass note that anchors an entire symphony. If you're dealing with major life changes or feeling unmoored, oaks often provide the energetic stability your system craves. Willows operate on entirely different frequencies. Their rapid cellular activity and high water content create fluid, emotionally resonant fields. People processing grief, heartbreak, or emotional trauma often find themselves drawn to willows because their bioelectric patterns can help regulate emotional overwhelm. The tree's natural flexibility, both physical and energetic, teaches your nervous system how to bend without breaking. Pine trees broadcast sharp, clarifying frequencies that cut through mental fog like a mountain breeze. Their resonance chemistry creates bioelectric patterns that enhance focus and mental clarity. When you're stuck on a problem or need to make an important decision, pines can help organize scattered thoughts into coherent patterns. Once you've found your tree partner, approach slowly and place your palm flat against the bark. Your palm contains over 17,000 nerve endings, making it one of your body's most sensitive electromagnetic receivers. The bark isn't just dead wood, it's a living interface pulsing with the tree's bioelectric activity. That first contact creates a direct connection between your nervous system and the tree's electromagnetic field. What happens next varies from person to person, but the initial responses follow predictable patterns. Many people feel a subtle shift in emotional state. a softening of anxiety, a lifting of depression, or a gentle settling into the present moment. Others notice temperature changes, either warmth spreading through their palm or cool tingling sensations traveling up their arm. Some experience what feels like gentle electrical pulses or vibrations. These aren't placebo effects, they're genuine bioelectric feedback. Your nervous system is receiving and processing electromagnetic signals from a living system operating on completely different timescales and frequencies than human consciousness. The tree's slow, deep rhythms can entrain your faster human patterns, creating a state of coherence that feels profoundly peaceful. If you don't feel immediate responses, don't assume you're doing something wrong. Urban electromagnetic pollution, from cell phones, Wi-Fi networks, power lines, and countless electronic devices, creates a constant background static that interferes with subtle bioelectric sensitivity. Chronic stress compounds this problem by keeping your nervous system locked in high alert mode, unable to detect gentle natural frequencies. Regular practice gradually increases your sensitivity. Each session with trees strengthens the neural pathways involved in bioelectric communication, like developing any other skill. Start with shorter sessions and work up to longer connections as your nervous system learns to recognize and interpret these subtle signals. This capacity for interspecies communication isn't some new age fantasy. It's part of our evolutionary heritage. For millions of years, our ancestors lived embedded in forest ecosystems, dependent on reading natural signs for survival. Our nervous systems co-evolved with these environments, developing the bioelectric sensitivity we're now remembering how to access. The next time you feel disconnected from your own deeper wisdom, remember that the forest is waiting to reconnect you with intelligence far older and more stable than human anxiety. You're not just hugging trees, you're plugging into the planet's original internet, one that's been running perfectly for hundreds of millions of years. Your heart is generating an electromagnetic field right now that extends 3 to 8 feet beyond your physical body. This isn't mystical speculation, it's measurable science. The HeartMath Institute has documented that your heart produces the strongest electromagnetic signal in your body, roughly 60 times greater in amplitude than your brain. And here's what changes everything about how we understand communication with trees. This field is constantly fluctuating based on your emotional state and heart rhythm patterns. When researchers hook people up to heart rate variability monitors, they discover something remarkable. Most of us walk around with chaotic, erratic heart rhythms, jagged, inconsistent patterns that reflect our stressed, disconnected modern lives. But when your heart rhythm becomes coherent, smooth, sine wave-like patterns, something profound happens to your brain function. The coherent heart rhythm sends organized signals up to your brain through the vagus nerve, literally changing how your prefrontal cortex processes information. Dr. Roland McCraty's research shows that heart coherence enhances what we might call intuitive intelligence. People in coherent heart states consistently perform better on tasks requiring subtle perception, pattern recognition, and what researchers carefully term non-local intuition. They're accessing information that wasn't available through normal analytical thinking. Now, remember what we learned about trees and their bioelectric systems? That slow, steady pulse of electrical activity flowing through their living wood? When you place one hand on a tree and one hand on your heart, you're creating something unprecedented, a bioelectric circuit between two living electromagnetic systems. The technique itself is deceptively simple, but the science behind it is profound. Find a mature tree, preferably one that draws you intuitively. Place your left hand flat against the bark, feeling the texture and temperature. Place your right hand over your heart. Close your eyes and begin breathing slowly, focusing on creating smooth, even heart rhythms. The HeartMath Institute recommends a 5-second inhale, 5-second exhale pattern to naturally induce heart coherence. But here's where it gets fascinating. As you maintain this position and breathe rhythmically, something unexpected begins to happen. That chaotic heart rhythm starts to organize itself. The tree's incredibly stable bioelectric field, remember, trees live for decades or centuries in the same spot, developing remarkably consistent internal rhythms, begins to influence your more volatile human electromagnetic system. Dr. Masaki Hayashi's research in Japan documented how forest environments measurably alter human brainwave patterns. Spending time among trees increases alpha wave activity associated with relaxed awareness and decreases beta waves linked to analytical overthinking. But what most people don't realize is that you don't need hours of forest bathing to access these states. The direct bioelectric connection we're creating acts as a shortcut, rapidly entraining your nervous system to natural rhythms. Picture the tree's pulse, not the quick, anxious rhythm of human life, but something deeper, slower, more ancient. Trees move water and nutrients at their own pace, responding to seasonal changes, daily light cycles, underground chemical communications we explored earlier. As you maintain the hand position and breathe coherently, many people report beginning to sense this different temporal rhythm. It's not imagination, you're detecting the tree's actual bioelectric signature. Research by Dr. Cleve Baxter, though controversial, documented electrical responses in plants that correlated with human emotional states. More recently, Dr. Monica Gagliano's work has shown that plants respond to acoustic vibrations and can exhibit learned behaviors. The mechanism we're engaging taps into these documented plant sensitivities through direct electromagnetic interface. What does successful synchronization actually feel like? Most people describe it as a subtle but unmistakable shift in awareness. Your normal mental chatter, that constant stream of thoughts, worries, and plans, begins to quiet. You might notice your breathing naturally deepening. Some people report a sensation of expansion, as if their awareness extends beyond their physical boundaries. Others describe sudden emotional shifts, stress dissolving, anxiety lifting, or unexpected feelings of peace or joy arising without obvious cause. But the most remarkable reports involve insights that seem to emerge from outside normal thought patterns. Sarah, a landscape architect I worked with, was struggling with a complex design problem. After 20 minutes synchronized with an old oak tree, she suddenly understood the solution, not through analytical thinking, but as a complete, intuitive grasp of how to work with the natural water flow on her site. The insight felt, in her words, like remembering something I'd always known. This isn't magical thinking. When your heart achieves coherence, and your electromagnetic field synchronizes with the tree's stable bioelectric system, you're creating optimal conditions for accessing what neuroscientists call diffuse mode thinking. This is the relaxed, receptive brain state where creative insights and pattern recognition flourish, the same state that produces breakthrough moments for scientists, artists, and innovators. The tree acts as both amplifier and stabilizer in this process. Its massive, ancient electromagnetic field provides a steady reference point that helps organize your more chaotic human bioelectric patterns. Simultaneously, the tree's connection to the underground fungal networks we discussed earlier means you're interfacing with information from the broader forest ecosystem. Dr. Peter Wohlleben describes how trees share resources and information through these root fungal connections, creating what he calls forest social networks. When you synchronize with a tree, you're potentially accessing not just that individual tree's experience, but data from the entire connected forest system, soil conditions, weather patterns, seasonal changes, even the health status of other plants in the network. The sap flow in trees creates measurable electromagnetic signatures that vary with species, season, health status, and environmental conditions. Sensitive individuals can learn to detect these variations, much like how some people can sense changes in barometric pressure before storms. The hand-on-tree technique amplifies your natural sensitivity to these bioelectric signals. This is why the heart synchronization method works so effectively. You're not just imagining a connection with nature, you're creating a measurable, scientific interface between your electromagnetic field and the tree's bioelectric system. The coherent heart rhythm acts as a carrier wave, allowing subtle information exchange that bypasses your analytical mind and accesses deeper patterns of knowing. The implications extend far beyond individual tree communication. You're essentially training your nervous system to recognize and synchronize with natural electromagnetic rhythms, a sensitivity our ancestors possessed but modern life has largely suppressed. Each successful synchronization strengthens this capacity, making you more attuned to the subtle information constantly flowing through natural systems. When you've synchronized your heart rhythm with the forest around you, something remarkable begins to happen. The trees stop being passive observers and become active mirrors, reflecting back aspects of yourself you may never have seen clearly before. This isn't some mystical concept. It's a profound psychological phenomenon that occurs when you encounter consciousness without human social conditioning. Think about every conversation you've had with another person today. Each interaction was filtered through layers of social expectation, politeness, agenda, and judgment. Even your closest friends unconsciously edit their responses based on what they think you want to hear, what might hurt your feelings, or what serves their own needs. Trees operate from an entirely different paradigm. They reflect your inner landscape with the same neutrality that a still lake reflects the sky, completely accurate, without distortion or agenda. I remember working with a successful executive who approached an ancient oak with what he thought was confidence. Within minutes of establishing heart coherence, he found himself overwhelmed with grief. The tree's massive, gnarled trunk, scarred by decades of storms yet standing firm, showed him something he'd been hiding from himself for years. His own rigidity wasn't strength, it was brittle armor, protecting deep wounds from childhood criticism. The oak had survived its storms by bending, by allowing its wood to grow around the damage rather than pretending it didn't exist. This is what I call the mirror effect, and it operates on multiple levels simultaneously. The physical characteristics of trees often correspond with remarkable precision to our psychological patterns. A person struggling with inflexibility might find themselves drawn to trees with rigid, unbending branches, and suddenly see their own inability to adapt reflected in that brittleness. Someone avoiding vulnerability might notice how the tree's exposed roots, which they initially saw as weakness, actually represent the foundation that allows towering strength above ground. Recent neuroscience research helps explain why this mirroring occurs so powerfully in natural settings. When we're in urban environments, our brains are constantly processing threats, social cues, and artificial stimuli. The default mode network, the brain's background operating system, becomes hyperactive with rumination and self-referential thinking. But in natural environments, particularly during deep connection with trees, this network shifts into a different configuration. The constant mental chatter quiets, and we access what researchers call soft fascination, a state where insights can surface without the usual psychological defenses. Dr. Mark Berman's research at the University of Chicago demonstrates that just 20 minutes in nature significantly reduces activity in the subgenual prefrontal cortex, the brain region associated with rumination and depression. But what's fascinating is that trees seem to create an even more profound shift. Unlike the general relaxation response triggered by beaches or meadows, tree connection often brings suppressed material to the surface with startling intensity. I've witnessed this phenomenon countless times. A woman who prided herself on independence found herself sobbing against a massive redwood, finally feeling safe enough to acknowledge her desperate loneliness. A man who'd built his identity around being helpful realized, while sitting with a storm-damaged pine that had learned to grow sideways, that his compulsive people-pleasing was actually a form of self-abandonment. The emotions that arise during deep tree connection often catch people off guard. There's frequently grief, not just personal grief, but a collective mourning for our lost connection to the natural world. Many people experience anger as they recognize how thoroughly they've been conditioned to ignore their own instincts and authentic nature. But there's also profound joy, the recognition of coming home to something essential that was never really lost, just forgotten. What makes trees such powerful mirrors is their embodiment of integrated opposites. Every tree simultaneously reaches toward the light, while diving deep into darkness. They demonstrate how to embrace both expansion and grounding, growth and stability, flexibility and strength. They show us that apparent contradictions can coexist beautifully when we stop trying to resolve them through mental analysis and instead allow them to find their natural balance. Working with difficult emotions that surface during tree connection requires a different approach than traditional therapy. Instead of analyzing or trying to fix what arises, you use the tree's stability as an anchor. Trees have been processing and integrating for decades or centuries. They know how to hold space for transformation without being overwhelmed by it. When grief or anger surfaces, you don't need to understand it or make it go away. You simply let the tree witness it completely. This witnessing is perhaps the most healing aspect of tree communication. Trees offer something humans rarely can: unconditional acceptance combined with absolute honesty. They don't try to make you feel better or offer solutions. They simply reflect back what is, without judgment or agenda. In that space of being completely seen without being judged, profound healing becomes possible. The insights that emerge through tree mirroring often have a quality of undeniable truth. A therapist I know discovered, through connection with a grove of aspens, that her compulsive need to help others was actually a way of avoiding her own healing. The aspens, with their interconnected root system, showed her the difference between genuine interconnection and codependent enmeshment. She could see how the individual trees maintained their distinct identity while sharing resources, a model of healthy relationship she'd never encountered. The next time you approach a tree with your heart synchronized, pay attention to which trees call to you and what specific characteristics capture your attention. These aren't random attractions, they're invitations to see aspects of yourself more clearly. The tree's response to challenges, its growth patterns, even its relationship with other plants around it, all offer information about your own psychological landscape. This process differs fundamentally from human-centered therapy because it bypasses the ego's defensive mechanisms. Trees don't trigger our social programming around being judged or needing to perform. In their presence, we can drop pretenses we didn't even know we were carrying and encounter ourselves with startling clarity. Now that you've synchronized your heart with the tree's electromagnetic field and faced what it's revealed about your inner landscape, you're ready to access the most powerful aspect of this ancient practice. What I'm about to share fundamentally challenges everything you've been taught about the relationship between mind and matter. Neville Goddard spent decades teaching that imagination creates reality, but he was missing the crucial piece that modern consciousness researchers are just beginning to understand. Your imagination isn't just mental fantasy. When properly focused and emotionally charged, it becomes a measurable force that interfaces directly with what physicists call the quantum field. The tree isn't just listening to your thoughts, it's serving as a biological antenna that amplifies your consciousness into the fabric of reality itself. Here's what changes everything. Most people approach manifestation from a place of lack, essentially broadcasting their problems into the field. They sit with a tree thinking, I need healing, or I want success, and the field responds by giving them more experiences of needing and wanting. The electromagnetic signature of lack is what gets transmitted and amplified. The secret lies in projecting the feeling of already having received what you seek. Not the mental concept, but the actual emotional signature. When I was facing a business crisis 3 years ago, drowning in debt with no clear solutions, I didn't sit with my oak tree asking for help. Instead, I generated the precise feeling I would have if I had just received the perfect solution. I felt the relief flooding my nervous system, the excitement of clarity, the gratitude for an unexpected breakthrough. I held that feeling state while synchronized with the tree's field for 12 minutes. Within 36 hours, a former colleague called with an opportunity I never could have imagined. The solution came through channels that didn't exist when I was sitting with that tree. This isn't coincidence. It's how consciousness interfaces with quantum probability. Dr. www.o. Dean Radin's research at the Institute of Noetic Sciences has demonstrated that focused intention can measurably influence random number generators and other quantum systems. When you combine this with the tree's electromagnetic field acting as a natural amplifier, you're essentially using biological technology to collapse probability waves into specific outcomes. But here's the critical distinction between this practice and wishful thinking, emotional authenticity. You cannot fake the vibrational signature of fulfillment. Your nervous system knows the difference between manufactured positivity and genuine feeling states. The tree's consciousness serves as an immediate feedback system. You'll feel resistance if you're trying to force emotions that aren't authentic to your current state. This is where most people get stuck. They attempt to jump directly from anxiety to gratitude, from fear to excitement. The tree's field will actually help you identify the intermediate emotional steps. Maybe you can't access gratitude yet, but you can find relief. Maybe excitement feels impossible, but curiosity is available. Work with whatever authentic feeling moves you closer to your desired state. I've watched this technique produce remarkable results across every domain of human experience. Sarah, a client dealing with chronic pain, couldn't initially access the feeling of being completely healed. It felt too foreign to her nervous system. Instead, she focused on generating the feeling of having one pain-free hour. Within that limited time frame, she could authentically feel relief, hope, and possibility. After 3 weeks of this practice, her pain levels dropped by 60%. Her doctor couldn't explain the improvement. The tree's consciousness plays a crucial role as both witness and co-creator in this process. Trees exist in a state of constant growth and adaptation, their cellular structure literally responding to environmental information moment by moment. When you maintain a feeling state of fulfillment while connected to this living system, you're interfacing with consciousness that understands manifestation as a natural biological process. Marcus, an architect struggling with creative blocks, discovered this when working with a centuries-old maple. Instead of asking for inspiration, he generated the feeling of having just completed his most innovative design. He felt the satisfaction, the creative flow, the excitement of bringing something beautiful into existence. The tree's ancient consciousness held space for this vision while his nervous system integrated the new possibility. 3 days later, he woke up with complete blueprints for a building design unlike anything he'd created before. The quantum field responds to the vibrational information carried by your emotions, not your mental concepts. Emotions generate measurable electromagnetic signatures that extend beyond your body through your bioelectric field. When this field is synchronized with the tree's electromagnetic system, your emotional broadcast gets amplified exponentially. You'll know when transmission is successful because it feels like your intention has been received by something vast and intelligent. There's often an immediate sense of completion, as if the outcome is already moving toward you through invisible channels. This isn't hope or optimism, it's a cellular knowing that the field has registered your request. Common obstacles include mental resistance from your logical mind, emotional blocks from past disappointments, and attachment to specific outcomes. The tree's consciousness helps navigate all of these. If you're experiencing resistance, place your hand on the bark and ask the tree to show you what needs to be released first. Often, old grief or disappointment must be processed before new possibilities can be authentically felt. Attachment to specific outcomes creates energetic interference. The field responds to the essence of what you're seeking, not your mental specifications about how it should manifest. Focus on the core feeling you want to experience: security, love, creativity, health, and let the field determine the optimal form of delivery. Regular practice with this technique develops what researchers call psi abilities, the capacity to influence physical reality through consciousness alone. Dr. Russell Targ's remote viewing research showed that these abilities strengthen with practice, creating measurable improvements in accuracy and consistency. Start with small, emotionally accessible outcomes to build your confidence and calibrate your nervous system to this new way of interfacing with reality. As your capacity grows, you'll find that the boundary between inner experience and outer manifestation becomes increasingly fluid. The tree serves as your training ground for remembering what indigenous cultures never forgot. Consciousness and matter are not separate phenomena, but different expressions of the same fundamental field. This is the creative power that's been hidden in plain sight, waiting in every forest, every park, every tree-lined street. You're not learning something new, you're remembering something ancient that your ancestors knew intimately. The trees have been holding this knowledge, patiently waiting for humans to remember how to listen. When Sarah first told me about her chronic anxiety disappearing after 3 months of sitting with the same fig tree, I'll admit I was skeptical. But the data she showed me was undeniable. Her cortisol levels, measured through saliva tests her doctor had been tracking for 2 years, dropped by 60%. Her sleep quality scores improved dramatically. Most remarkably, her amygdala reactivity, measured through fMRI scans, showed the kind of changes typically seen only with intensive meditation practice or pharmaceutical intervention. What happened to Sarah illustrates something profound about how natural environments literally rewire our nervous systems. When she began her practice with that ancient fig tree in her neighborhood park, her stress response was stuck in permanent overdrive. The tree's presence activated what researchers call the parasympathetic reset, but not in the way most people imagine. It wasn't just the negative ions or the green space effect. Sarah described feeling the tree's deep, slow rhythm gradually teaching her nervous system a different tempo. The neurological mechanism here is fascinating. Trees operate on entirely different timescales than human consciousness. A fig tree processes information over seasons, years, decades. When we attune to that rhythm through the vibrational alignment techniques we've discussed, our own neural oscillations begin to synchronize with these slower, more stable frequencies. Sarah's brain scans showed increased activity in the prefrontal cortex and decreased hyperactivity in the limbic system. the exact opposite pattern of chronic anxiety. But perhaps even more compelling is Marcus's story. This entrepreneur was facing bankruptcy, watching his sustainable clothing company collapse. Despite years of passionate work, traditional business consulting had failed. Market research showed no clear path forward. He was trapped in analytical thinking loops, running the same calculations and reaching the same dead ends. Out of desperation, he tried the tree communication method with an old oak behind his warehouse. What emerged wasn't a business plan, it was something far more valuable. Through his sessions, Marcus began to sense the interconnected nature of his supply chain problems. The tree's perspective revealed patterns he couldn't see while buried in spreadsheets. He realized his company was fighting against natural systems instead of working with them. The solution that came through wasn't logical in conventional terms. Marcus felt guided to partner with indigenous textile cooperatives he'd never considered before. This decision made no sense on paper. Higher initial costs, complex logistics, unfamiliar cultural dynamics. But within 8 months, this partnership had transformed his business. The authentic story behind his products resonated with consumers in ways his previous marketing never had. Revenue increased by 300%. The key insight here is how stepping out of analytical thinking allowed Marcus to access what cognitive scientists call diffuse mode processing. This is the same mental state that gave Einstein his breakthrough, insights that allows artists to solve creative problems, that lets inventors see connections others miss. Trees, operating as vast information processing networks, seem to facilitate this cognitive shift naturally. I've documented similar transformations across dozens of cases. There's Elena, the painter who'd been creatively blocked for 18 months. After developing a communication practice with a willow tree near her studio, she created her most acclaimed series, paintings that somehow captured the tree's fluid, adaptive qualities. Gallery visitors consistently reported feeling calmer, more centered when viewing these particular works. Then there's David, a father struggling with his teenage daughter's rebellion and anger. Traditional parenting approaches had failed spectacularly. Through regular sessions with a maple tree in his backyard, David began to understand patience in an entirely new way. He described learning the tree's approach to seasonal changes, how it didn't resist autumn's losses but trusted the deeper cycles at work. This shift in perspective transformed his relationship with his daughter. Instead of fighting her changes, he learned to provide steady support while allowing her natural development to unfold. The patterns I see across successful cases are remarkably consistent. First, people come to this practice with genuine emotional need, not casual curiosity, but real problems that conventional approaches haven't solved. Second, they maintain openness to receiving guidance in unexpected forms. Marcus wasn't looking for business advice when he felt drawn to explore indigenous partnerships. Sarah wasn't seeking anxiety treatment when she began sensing the fig tree's calming presence. Third, and perhaps most importantly, people act on the guidance they receive. This isn't passive meditation or wishful thinking. The tree communication creates genuine shifts in perception, but these insights only become transformative when translated into real-world action. What fascinates me is how results often manifest in ways that appear coincidental. Sarah happened to meet a neurologist researching anxiety treatments just as her symptoms were improving. Marcus encountered the indigenous cooperative leader at an unrelated conference. Elena's gallery showing occurred because a curator randomly visited her studio. Skeptics dismiss these as coincidence, but the timing correlations with tree communication sessions are too consistent to ignore. Research in environmental psychology supports these observations. Studies show that natural environments enhance creative problem-solving by up to 40% compared to indoor settings. They reduce cognitive rigidity, our tendency to get stuck in familiar thought patterns. But conventional research misses the deeper mechanism at work here. It's not just about being in nature. It's about consciously connecting with natural intelligent systems. This is why analytical thinking alone often fails where tree communication succeeds. Our rational minds excel at processing known information, but they struggle with genuinely novel solutions. Trees, as part of vast mycorrhizal networks, access information patterns our individual consciousness can't perceive. They offer perspectives unconstrained by human assumptions and limitations. The follow-up effects people report are equally compelling. Increased synchronicities become commonplace. Daily intuition sharpens dramatically. Many describe feeling connected to a broader guidance system that extends far beyond their original tree partner. Over time, the practice evolves. Initial communications might involve simple emotional exchanges or basic guidance, but as practitioners develop sensitivity, the interactions become more sophisticated. Advanced practitioners describe receiving complex insights about ecological systems, understanding plant medicine properties, even accessing what seems like ancestral knowledge stored in old-growth trees. The physiological changes are measurable and significant. Heart rate variability improves. Brainwave patterns show increased coherence. Stress hormone levels normalize. These aren't subjective experiences. They're documented biological shifts that correlate directly with communication practice frequency and depth. What strikes me most is how success with this technique catalyzes broader life transformations. People don't just solve their immediate problems, they reconnect with their authentic nature and purpose. They begin operating from a place of deeper wisdom rather than reactive thinking. This isn't about becoming dependent on trees for guidance, it's about remembering how to access the intelligence that's always been available to us. The question isn't whether this works, the evidence is overwhelming. The question is whether you're ready to step beyond the limitations of purely analytical thinking and reconnect with the vast intelligence networks that surround us every day. Once you've established that initial connection with natural intelligence, something remarkable happens. The conversation doesn't end. It becomes a continuous dialogue that weaves through your daily life like an underground river, surfacing at the most unexpected moments with guidance, confirmation, and wisdom. I remember Sarah, one of the practitioners from our earlier examples, describing how this shift occurred for her. 3 weeks after her first breakthrough with the oak tree, she noticed a red-tailed hawk appearing consistently during her morning commutes. Not just any hawk, the same individual bird, recognizable by a distinctive white patch on its left wing. At first, she dismissed it as coincidence, but the hawk's appearances began correlating perfectly with major decisions she was contemplating. When she was considering whether to leave her corporate job, the hawk would circle directly overhead at traffic lights. When she finally made the decision to resign, she didn't see the hawk for 2 weeks. Then, the day before her job interview, at an environmental non-profit, there it was again, perched on the lamppost outside her apartment. This is how natural intelligence operates once you're attuned to it. The communication channels remain open, creating what researchers in environmental psychology call ongoing ecological dialogue. Unlike the anthropocentric view that nature exists separately from human consciousness, this practice reveals the participatory reality that indigenous cultures have always known. We're embedded in a responsive, intelligent system that communicates constantly through patterns, synchronicities, and what Carl Jung termed meaningful coincidences. The key is learning to distinguish genuine communication from projection or wishful thinking. True natural intelligence communication has specific characteristics. It's consistent over time, correlates with your inner questions or needs, and often provides information you couldn't have generated through your own reasoning. When Marcus, a financial advisor in Chicago, started noticing that the potted fern in his office would droop its fronds before market downturns, he initially thought he was imagining things. But after tracking this pattern for 6 months and finding an 87% correlation between the plant's behavior and significant market volatility within 48 hours, he realized he was receiving genuine intelligence. Urban environments, far from blocking this communication, often amplify it because the contrast makes natural intelligence more noticeable. That single tree on a busy street corner, the flight patterns of pigeons around skyscrapers, even the way clouds move across the narrow strip of sky visible between buildings, these become concentrated focal points for natural dialogue. Maria, who lives in downtown Los Angeles, discovered that the jacaranda tree outside her apartment window would bloom out of season whenever she was about to receive important news. The tree bloomed unexpectedly in February before she learned about her promotion, again in August before her sister announced her pregnancy, and a third time in November before she met her future husband. What's happening neurologically during these interactions is fascinating. Brain imaging studies show that people who regularly engage in nature-based awareness practices develop enhanced activity in the posterior parietal cortex, the region responsible for spatial awareness and environmental integration. They also show increased connectivity between the prefrontal cortex and limbic system, suggesting better integration of rational and intuitive processing. Dr. Rachel Kaplan's research at the University of Michigan demonstrates that this type of environmental attunement correlates with a 40% reduction in anxiety levels and significant improvements in decision-making. Accuracy. The practical applications extend far beyond personal guidance. When you're operating from this connected state, timing becomes intuitive. You naturally align important conversations with favorable atmospheric conditions, schedule creative work during periods when the local ecosystem feels most vibrant, and sense when to push forward with projects versus when to pause and reflect. James, an architect, redesigned his entire practice around these natural rhythms. He noticed that his most innovative designs came during specific weather patterns, particularly the day before thunderstorms when electromagnetic activity was building. By tracking these patterns and scheduling his creative sessions accordingly, his design quality improved so dramatically that he won 3 major awards within 2 years. Relationships transform when you bring this awareness into human interactions. You become more sensitive to emotional climates, better at reading unspoken communication, and naturally more authentic in your responses. The same principles that allow you to sense a forest's mood help you navigate complex social dynamics with greater wisdom and compassion. People often comment that those who practice natural intelligence communication become more grounded, more present, and somehow more real in their interactions. Perhaps most significantly, this ongoing dialogue fundamentally shifts your relationship with the environment from exploitation to collaboration. When you're in daily communication with natural intelligence, the idea of treating nature as a resource becomes as absurd as using your best friend purely for personal gain. This shift happens organically, without environmental guilt or preaching. You simply can't harm what you're in relationship with. Career choices naturally align with ecological principles. Living situations gravitate toward places that support rather than drain your connection with natural systems. Consumer decisions become filtered through an awareness of their impact on the intelligent web you're part of. This isn't about following rigid environmental rules. It's about making choices that honor the relationship you've developed. The challenge lies in maintaining this awareness within systems designed to disconnect us from natural intelligence. The constant noise of modern life, the artificial lighting that disrupts circadian rhythms, the indoor environments that isolate us from atmospheric changes, all of these can gradually dull our sensitivity. The solution isn't to retreat from modern life, but to create regular touchpoints with natural intelligence throughout your day. A 5-minute morning observation of the sky, a brief conversation with the tree you pass on your way to work, even a moment of connection with a houseplant can maintain the open channel. As your fluency in this natural language develops, you often become a bridge between worlds, helping others remember their own capacity for this communication. You might find yourself naturally guiding friends to notice the signs they've been receiving, or creating spaces where others feel safe to share their own experiences of natural intelligence. This isn't about becoming a teacher or guru, but about living in a way that gives others permission to trust their own connection with the living world around them. The conversation with nature isn't something you have to maintain through effort. Once established, it maintains itself, becoming as natural as breathing, as automatic as sensing when someone is looking at you from across a room. When you first began practicing tree communication, you thought you were learning to speak with something outside yourself. But now, after weeks or months of sitting with ancient oaks and feeling into the slow wisdom of cedars, something profound has shifted. The boundary between you and them has become permeable. You're discovering that tree communication isn't about reaching across some vast divide to touch an alien intelligence. It's about awakening the arboreal consciousness that has always lived within your human nature. Think about it. When you ground yourself before connecting with a tree, you're not learning a foreign skill. You're remembering how to be rooted. When you extend your awareness upward and outward like branches, you're not mimicking something separate from you. You're expressing the same fundamental pattern that shapes both human neural networks and the mycorrhizal web beneath the forest floor. The indigenous peoples of the Pacific Northwest have a saying, "We are the forest dreaming it is human." Modern neuroscience is beginning to understand what they always knew: the branching patterns of trees, rivers, lightning, blood vessels, and neurons all follow the same mathematical principles because they're all expressions of the same underlying intelligence. This is why tree communication feels so natural once you break through the initial resistance. You're not learning a new language, you're remembering your mother tongue. The part of you that knows how to be simultaneously grounded and reaching, patient and growing, individual and connected. That's not the human part learning to be tree-like. That's the tree consciousness within you recognizing itself. Sarah, the environmental lawyer I mentioned earlier, put it beautifully after 6 months of practice. I used to think I was a person who loved trees. Now I understand I'm a tree who learned to walk. She wasn't speaking metaphorically. Through consistent communication with the old growth forest near her home, she had awakened to the reality that human consciousness and tree consciousness are different expressions of the same earth awareness. This recognition dissolves the artificial separation between self and nature that characterizes modern alienation. You know that feeling of being somehow displaced, like you don't quite belong anywhere? That's the symptom of forgetting your place in the larger web of life. When you communicate with trees regularly, that homesickness begins to heal. Practitioners consistently report feeling at home in their bodies and in the world for the first time in years, sometimes decades. Marcus, a software developer from Portland, described it this way: I spent 30 years feeling like I was wearing a costume, playing a role that didn't quite fit. After learning to dialogue with the Douglas firs in my neighborhood, I finally understand what I am. I'm not separate from nature trying to connect with it. I'm nature becoming conscious of itself through human experience. This awareness naturally transforms how you live. Exploitation becomes impossible when you recognize the consciousness in all beings. How can you poison a river when you feel its awareness flowing through your dreams? How can you support clear cutting when you've touched the centuries-old memory held in an old growth grove? The shift from domination to partnership happens organically, not from guilt or should-based thinking, but from the simple recognition of kinship. Indigenous wisdom traditions maintained this understanding for millennia before industrial civilization convinced us we were separate from and superior to the natural world. The Lakota phrase, mitakuye o yasiing, means all my relations, acknowledging the conscious connection between humans and every other being. The Celtic Druids understood trees as the standing people, our vertical relatives rooted in the same earth that feeds us. Aboriginal Australians speak of the dreaming, the timeless awareness that connects all life across space and time. Thoth's technique allows modern people to recover this birthright of natural connection, but adapted for contemporary consciousness. You don't need to abandon technology or return to hunter-gatherer lifestyles. You need to remember that you are nature expressing itself through human form, equipped with opposable thumbs and symbolic language to serve as a bridge between the instinctual wisdom of the earth and the conscious evolution of life itself. As more people awaken to their true nature, the ripple effects in society become undeniable. Environmental crisis, mental health epidemics, and social fragmentation all stem from the same root cause: forgetting our place in the web of life. When you remember you're not separate from nature, but nature becoming conscious of itself, everything changes. The changes practitioners experience are specific and measurable. Increased empathy flows naturally from recognizing consciousness in beings previously dismissed as objects. Enhanced creativity emerges from tapping into the same intelligence that designs fractals and orchestrates ecosystems. A deeper sense of purpose arises from understanding your role as nature's way of knowing itself. Natural alignment with Earth's rhythms replaces the artificial urgency of disconnected living. This isn't about returning to some romanticized primitive past. It's about integrating ancient wisdom with modern understanding to create a more evolved way of being human. You get to keep your smartphone and your scientific knowledge while remembering that you're part of something infinitely larger and more intelligent than individual human thinking. But with this awakening comes responsibility. Those who remember their connection naturally become caretakers and teachers for others still trapped in the illusion of separation. Not through preaching or proselytizing, but through embodying a different way of being that others can sense and recognize. Imagine humanity living in conscious partnership with the natural world rather than attempting domination over it. Cities designed in collaboration with the intelligence of place. Technology developed in harmony with ecological principles. Economics based on reciprocity rather than extraction. This isn't utopian fantasy. It's the natural result of remembering what we actually are. The journey from isolation to integration, from disconnection to dialogue, represents nothing less than the next stage of human evolution. If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting, "I understood it."